we're here with Shirley. If anyone's that's ever having any woes with money or any sort of concerns about, hey, what's the next step? How do I take control of my money and my future? And we don't mention the B word, which is budgeting. But essentially, the Shirley and her team's the sort of the guru. So if you're listening to this and you're worried, like you don't know how to do it or where to start, and pretty much like majority of New Zealanders have some level of money issues, at least the ones I come across. But how are you? Firstly, how are you going today?
Yeah, good. It was a lovely weekend. It's always nice to get out in the sun, and we're very fortunate to live in the Bay. So, yeah, great.
Yeah, let's not rub it in, eh? Well, in fairness, I had a beautiful moment. Like we got some palm trees in our backyard, and there was like tropical rain and like a yellow hue. So we had a bit of a taste of what you guys have.
Just close your mind. Close your eyes and pretend you're in Fiji for a minute.
Okay, it'll be a bit awkward for people listening, but I'll do what you ask. So I always find interesting anyone I talk to, like their journey and their story and what got them into it, because I seem to find people's purpose is usually linked to like experiences that they've had that are either challenging or and that sort of led them on to helping a version of themselves in the world around them. It's just a theory. I don't know if it's true. But, yeah. Okay. Interesting. So what's your story then? Shirley?
Well, I actually started out as a nurse and worked for a few years in nursing and wanted to do something else. Went on to do all sorts of things, actually just worked for one company and then someone else would say, hey, why don't you join us? So I've ended up working in all sorts of areas and then working in business support within the disability sector, but probably about 20 years ago, started working in social services, which I guess is why I went nursing in the first place, is that passion for working with people. And I've always been driven by a desire to see equity in society, equality, I used to think, but equity is more accurate. And I know for so many people, money is at the base of their well-being, and when it's not taken care of, everything else in life starts to crumble. So so I had an opportunity. I was asked whether I would be interested in applying for this role, and it kind of brought together all of the things that I'd done in my life. It's a very rewarding place to work. And you're right in that a great number of the people in my team, I've got between 15 and 20 in my team, have had their own journeys, and that's what's brought them to work in this area.
Well, what's it like? How does the sort of the business structure of sort of what you guys do? I mean, people fall in the frame anytime I get on the podcast. They talk like everything's sunshine and rainbows. Well, we all know life's a little bit more colorful, but like, what's the actual? How does it work? Like I know normally we'd go into like the value adding side of things, but I'm just curious at the moment. So you got 15 to 20 people that need to be paid. Like where's the money come from? Because you're helping people that don't have money.
We do it all for love, Ryan, all for love.
Out of love, yeah. Kumbaya.
No, we're funded through MSD. So we're funded by the government, which is why our service is completely free. We don't sell anything. It's purely funded by grants sometimes, but 99% funded through government funding. Which is really important, I guess, because for a couple of reasons. One, it means that it's available to everyone. There's absolutely no cost. There's absolutely no motivation to point anyone in any direction because there's no commissions or anything like that. It is purely about helping people to take control of their money. And we work from a strength base. And we work in a very sort of holistic way. So I think there was a time when our sort of work was all about, numbers in a line, what comes in, what goes out, and, don't do that. And, feeling quite judged and chastised in people's minds, I think, in the past. The work that we do is very different than that. We don't have any agenda. It's about what your goal is and what you want. And we try and sort out some of the best way to get there. And a huge, huge amount of the work that we do is around advocacy and negotiation, budget, which is why we're moving away from that word, apart from it's up there with diet is something that nobody thinks as I really wants to do. but yeah, budgeting is a small part of what we do. Actually, it's that support and mentoring with people who are often really, really stressed when they come to see us and at a bit of a loss as to what to do next.
Hmm. Yeah, I find like I don't actually have much interest in finance, which is interesting because I'm in finance.
Odd
But
job choice.
yeah, yeah, thanks. No, I'm just fascinated in people and why they do what they do, like the psychology of money and the
Mm,
what constitutes a meaningful life. Like,
mm,
sometimes a lot of my conversation is like, why are you doing that job? Like,
yeah,
like even though it's paying income and even though it'll improve our revenue as a company if you save more and invest more.
yeah.
I'm just fascinated. Like, so someone comes in stressed, like whether let's say someone's out there and they're stressed, or maybe they have a friend that's going through it. They're not sure how to approach the subject. Like, firstly,
Mm,
how do you sort of get them into a space where they're less overwhelmed, and then
mm.
how do you pivot in a favorable direction?
Yeah. I guess one of the nicest things I heard from a client when I started, she'd been working with one of our team, Cody, and she wanted to meet me. And she said, the thing that I love most about meeting her is that I don't feel alone anymore.
Hmm.
And that's huge for people. I often am quite a visual person. And when I think of problems, I think of a big pile of rocks on a road. And often people are just standing there and they don't even know which one to pick up first. They're so overwhelmed. And if we think of that, that sort of flight, fight, freeze that we all learn about in terms of the way we manage stress, for a lot of people when it comes to money, they're definitely in the freeze phase. They just don't know where to start, so they don't start at all. And so when we meet with people, when the team meets with people, it's really understanding what's most important to them in that moment. There's no use in having a great long conversation about their goals in life when they're sitting there thinking, if I don't get this power bill paid, I'm not going to have any electricity tomorrow. So, it might be in that moment just helping to address that crisis. Um, and then stepping back from there and understanding what else is going on for them, because it's very seldom just money.
Hmm.
And it's never just education. There's a whole raft of reasons why we all do what we do, and knowledge is vital, but it's not everything.
Hmm.
So understanding the other factors that are contributing. So we have people who come to us, Ryan, who are very capable but have struggled to manage their money because of some life events. So it might be as individual as a relationship breakup, or the loss of a job, or something as global as COVID. Um,
Hmm.
and suddenly the rug is just ripped out from underneath their feet. And sometimes the people who have earned the most, and as I'm sure you're the same as me, the more you earn, the more you spend.
Yeah.
Um, and if you've always had money, to not have it, you just can't even imagine how you would begin. But for a lot of our clients who live on very small amounts of income each week, they're incredibly frugal, they're incredibly resourceful, and they manage much better in those situations because they've built those skills, that resilience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people have a tendency to hate on the rich, or blame them for certain things. And I remember I had a couple come in and their joint income. Well, actually, she was earning all of it. She was earning 500,000 a year, and they saved nothing. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's a behavioral thing. It's like it's irrespective of how much you earn. I'd be curious though. I don't know if you've heard the podcast Girls That Invest. It like took off. We had her on the podcast, and they were talking about the concept of money manipulation and like how young women, or well, women in general and men, or they get in a situation where the money is being used as a manipulative measure to keep the
Mm,
person attached. Do you come
mm.
across that sort of thing? Like, do you have a trend of people that end up in those situations? Or
Uh, we do see that. We see it. We see it in a. I don't know if you'd say it's a benign way. We often see it in an older generation where one person has taken complete control of
Mm,
of the finances. And I remember we had a lady that we worked with recently, and her partner passed away, and she had no idea where anything was. She didn't know who the power was with. She didn't know how much money they had. She didn't know where it was invested. And she said to me, "I thought you'd think that I was stupid." And I said, "Not at all. It's just it's information that you don't know, and you're incredibly capable. We just went through about some of the things that she needed to get answers to, and I said, look, we'll work with you every week if that's what's needed till you get on your feet. And in fact, we think we saw her twice, because actually by the time she had a picture and she had her head around what she needed to do, she was incredibly capable. At the other end, we see people who may have one partner who's earning and spending and doing exactly what they like, and the person at the other end is trying to keep the house together, feed the kids, keep the electricity going, etc. And they're seen as completely different jobs, and rather than a team sort of approach to it. So yeah, I guess we do see that, and it's really tough, really difficult for people who go through a relationship breakup, when one person has always held control of the money, because that's just one more stress, one more challenge, one more hurdle to overcome to them regaining their confidence, their self-determination.
I see a lot of that in business partnerships where someone has complete autonomy over a certain process and no one's across it, and then it leads to, I guess, getting ripped off effectively. So do you like, when, let's say there's this team, you want to bring, because unifying in selling, it's, you got to unify the decision makers and get them on the same path going forward. How, from a budgeting standpoint, do you if you can only get like one in, do you educate them on how to facilitate those communication lines, and or like a way to get to both? And like, what's your tips for like that sort of relationship disparity you're talking about, on how can you mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, we try, particularly through COVID, we're actually running Zoom sessions at night time for that very reason. Well, one of those reasons, to be able to get both partners together. Because I know for my other half and I, if you're part of separate conversations, you see something and you think is great, you come back, oh, we should do this, this is awesome, blah, blah, blah. If they haven't been part of that process, then you're giving them the solution. They haven't built up the understanding of why. So it's much better if you can both be involved. And we also run education programs, and it's very much a facilitation called Money Mates, and organisations like ours across New Zealand run those. And they're really good because it's not about lecturing people, it's about everyone sitting together talking about their experiences, and it's quite a safe way to be able to bring things up. And hopefully, particularly for adults, we don't like to be told things, we like to discover them for ourselves. And it's a great way to start sort of challenging some of those ideas and things.
Where do you find these events? You said Good Money Mates. It's a good ring to
Money
it.
Mates, yeah. So organisations like ours, so across the country, and there's a couple of hundred of them, run a program called Money Mates. And for us, we run them all over the place, really, but we try really hard to run them particularly in places where people might not engage with us for whatever reason. So we were running them for a while at where we've got people do probation here. And that was awesome, because the people who were on community service would come in, spend a couple of hours with one of our mentors, and you had the corrections officers actually joining in the conversation. And 2 hours later, when they were out doing their community service, they were still talking about it, which is awesome, because actually it's had an impact on them, and they're starting to think about their beliefs around money and how they manage it, and whether it controls them or they control it. They start to think differently about it, and so that's really helpful.
How do you get into prisons? Like, well, you're doing community, but like this a medium term goal is to run sort of personal development, incorporating money, as well as like emotional regulation in prisons. But me and bureaucracy and authority don't go too well together. I'll probably relate more to the prisons than the system. But how do you like get into that sort of, like, is it possible to arrange sort of discussions there? Are they receptive? Are they not? Or you just, because you're part of the government, like in terms of grants and support, is it easier?
Yeah. We don't work in prisons, but there are certainly financial mentors who do. And I actually think you're right. I had this conversation. We had a Zoom meeting the other day with Department of Corrections FinCap our umbrella organisation, which I know you're aware of. They do some really great work around advocacy, and Westpac Bank. And we were talking about money for people who are incarcerated. And I was saying we need to be there at the time they go in, during that time, and when they come out, because all sorts of money issues occur when you're not earning and you're not able to pay for things, and they come out into a huge mess at the other end. And sometimes they can't get a bank account, sometimes they're not allowed in the bank, sometimes they're facing insolvency, etc., which we work through. But for us, I don't know that it is a government thing. I think it is about getting alongside people, and what we do is to say, what are you trying to achieve for the people, for the whānau that you work with, and how do we help you achieve the goals that you want for those people? So we see ourselves as integral to other social services, because that's the lovely thing about working in social service. We all have the same goals, and so there's no competition. There's no concern about sharing knowledge or information, because we want the same thing for people. We want individuals to be stronger, families to be stronger, and communities to be stronger as a result.
God, I felt like you're going to run for presidency now. That's a good little slogan you smashed out there. I feel like you've got notes looking at it, but that's all right.
Yeah, Post-its.
Yeah. I see the old look, and then you just rattle out that. That's impressive. What that may be quite an art to train 15 and 20 people, because they're kind of like psychologists, they're kind of like supportive, they're kind of like problem solvers. How do you educate? Like, where do you get your staff, or where do you source them, or how do you train them? Or
yeah, I don't actually deliver money, mate, so I can't take any credit for that. But
in your organisation,
yeah, the organisation does. Yeah, the people come from all sorts of different places, and it's funny, when I'm interviewing people, often people will come to us with an accounting or banking or even investment or business background, and those skills are magic. But I always say to them, this job isn't about money; it's about people. So I'm just thinking through my team, there's also vastly different. We do have people from accounting and business backgrounds. We have one person who was a jockey, then went on and worked for a credit agency, and we have another who's a teacher. I'm a nurse. All sorts of backgrounds, really. And it's we have some training, obviously, that we do, and I worked in investment before, so that's a helpful training as well. But we provide training, and a lot of it is those soft skills. It's that building rapport with people, understanding them, the empathy, the strength base, which is a bit of an art to do, because it's much easier to tell someone what to do than to facilitate a process of them learning and understanding what they need to do. Kind of, it's a bit like being a parent either. I don't have kids, but it works much better if it's their journey than you just telling them, because nobody likes to be told.
No. Well, I find most people have the answer. You just got to ask the right question.
Yeah, which is kind of like going to a counsellor, isn't it? You go to a counsellor, they don't say, right, these are your problems, and this is what you need to do. I'll see you in a week's time and you'll have those picked off. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
And sometimes for us, we might say you need to do these 3 things, particularly in a crisis, to get on top of it. But actually making long-term, ongoing change requires a lot more than that. And as I said, it's not just skill, it's confidence. It's capability, it's cultural beliefs, it's we talk about money personality. So what's your attitude to money? Is money something that spending something you reward yourself with when you're feeling low? Is it something that you feel controls you? Is it something that you just spend until it's gone? And for a lot of our clients, that's very true. There's no conscious decision around how they manage their money. They just spend it, and then when it's gone, there's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, this whole subject's fascinating. It's usually the content that's most well received. Most people I come across either have debt or bad spending habits. Unfortunately, it's hard to monetize that in a business sense, so they're an underserviced market. which, you don't want to put a person as a dollar sign. You also got to be realistic. So I've been trying to work out that middle ground of how can we create content at scale that will add value and support everyone. But then also that leads to, generating clients our end, so we have more freedom to be able to do that. What's the process like? So they come in, they're freaking out. So you dissociate and prioritize, basically saying, this is your next steps. You take out the little rock from the big pile, and then you console them. But like, what's the, what would you go through? Like attitudes and money, like do you have a process for every client and then adapt around it?
We do, but it's not that prescriptive, because it's a little bit like going to the doctor or to a counsellor. If you need to adjust to whatever the person is. At the end of the day, it's really about what's most important to that person. And sometimes, like we work with people who just need direction, but we also work with people who are experiencing poor mental health. We work with some people who are living with an intellectual disability. We work with some people who are living with addiction. And that can they might be living in a home and experiencing domestic violence, so often it's always about building the relation to really understand what's going on for that person, helping them identify what's important, because, you talk about personalities and, what is a good life and what is important to you. For me personally, security is really important. I don't desire to have a $5 million home and a Ferrari. That is not important to me at all. So, people's desires for their lives are different, and their goals are different. What we try to do is to make the client at the center of the decisions and give them back control. So it might, often people, for an example, someone will come in and say, I want my KiwiSaver out, can you help me? And so we will always help. But what we will do is we will start to, we'll look at bank statements, get information. A lot of people don't even know what debt they have. Start to put a budget together for them so we can understand where they are financially. But then before taking that step of helping them, it's like taking a step back and saying, so, okay, how did you get here? Because if we just help with your KiwiSaver, and KiwiSaver will say the same, you withdraw that money, if you don't address the underlying issues that got them to that point, then they're likely to be in exactly the same place in 6 months' time without KiwiSaver to help them out. And KiwiSaver is an investment. It's as you know, it's designed for the future. It's not to dip in, when things go astray. So we want to try and give people the skills and the confidence so that they can actually make some changes and be stronger going forward, more resilient going forward.
Fair. So does that mean you have like complementary industries, in the sense like you've got someone in and you recognize their high chance of suicide, or someone that's got an addiction, and then you got to make sure they're supported? Like, what are does it lead to like free opportunities for them for going through you? Like, because then you refer it, or how does that work?
So we work along the social service sector. I haven't worked in it outside here. I worked, as I say, when I lived in Auckland and things, I was nursing. But the sector here is very close, and we will refer within. And sometimes we even take a bit of a multidisciplinary approach where if somebody has significant challenges that they're living with their permission, we might work alongside community mental health, alongside an addiction service, alongside a housing provider, etc., etc. Sometimes it's more about referring someone on. So a lot of people who present with an addiction might need support from addiction services, but there might be some trauma counselling and things that's required as well. So we would connect them with the right people and continue to work with them, but recognising that we don't have all the answers, but knowing that within our social service sector, that there are people with the skills that person needs to help them to move forward. So we don't tend to, someone said to me once, are you in competition with financial planners? And I said, no, but I would love every single person we work with to have a financial planner, because that would mean they had enough money and enough control in their life that they could make some choices about money.
Maybe you're like college basketball and we're like the NBA. Like you get them all ready, and then we
Yeah,
we, we we put them to work.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you, like? I didn't know. I didn't warn you I was going to ask this question, but like, are there some organizations people should be mindful of if they have some of those issues, whether it's addiction, whether they need some counseling, or
You mean
um,
about people they could seek out?
yeah, just people
Yeah.
that help. I don't know of any. You know.
Oh, yeah, huge numbers, huge numbers. There and a lot of the call centers and things like that that you can contact will help direct you. But there are the Salvation Army have a great addiction system, support system. There are organisations that will help with housing, so housing trusts, community trusts, accessible properties, places like that. We have fantastic organisations here like we do a lot with the Pacific Island Community Trust, which is an amazing organisation.
Hmm.
And, there's a group of people who might not access us because of cultural and language differences, whereas we'll go and work with them and they will help. Whānau Ora is amazing. A lot of different organisations have whānau ora services. And that's particularly strong because that's about bringing the whole whānau, or can be about bringing the whole whānau together to provide support around them. Here we have organisations like Ngā Matapuna Oranga or Te Manitoroa, who is a health hauora, but also has other social services attached. So there's huge amounts of support. But you're right, if you've never accessed them, you don't, a bit like us, if people haven't accessed you or had to access social services before, they have very little understanding of what there is out there for people. And there is a lot of support. It's just about connecting people and helping them get through the door. Because that can be the hardest.
Yeah, it's that. Well, yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and then where is the door, and then how do you open it?
Yeah. And do I have the courage to go through sometimes, particularly if it's something like trauma around sexual assault. That's a huge step for someone to take. And a tough step to take.
Yeah. And it's very prevalent.
Particularly for people with addictions.
Yeah, well, I mean, the hardest thing about giving up an addiction isn't the actual substance; it's the emotions that follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because essentially, that's what you are. You're medicating the trauma, and the challenge is that, from a neuroscience standpoint, is the dopamine window narrows. So dopamine, a reinforcement chemical. They call it pleasure or reward chemical, but basically it reinforces behavior. So you have this high, and then your ability to get a certain stimulus that encourages you to enjoy life. You need more of a stimulus to be able to do that. So one, you got this heavy trauma. Two, you've got the substance you're using to medicate it. And three, it softens the edges of life.
Yep.
Pretty tough.
Yeah, which is why we need to look at it as a health concern, not a legal concern. I think for people, you're quite right, and it's true of it's so destructive, particularly to people's financial. Well, not particularly. That's not what I mean. It is destructive for people's financial well-being as well as every other element of their life.
Do you find certain trends? You talked about the association between addiction and sexual assault or trauma, or do you sort of see trends that sequentially lead to money issues? Like either it's either not a good role model showing them, or maybe they have certain emotional challenges or breakups, or what leads down that road, do you think?
Yeah, I think anyone can end up struggling financially. I don't think, and I think is it the silver lining of COVID? I don't know that it is. I think we used to think of mental health, and I think I've said this to you before, as either you were ill or you were well. And we now know that we have all been up and down that spectrum. I certainly have, from one end to the other. And we recognise now that people will go through that, and that it's okay, and that that's part of life, and we need to support people. Financial well-being, I think, is becoming a little bit like that, and it takes away some of that stigma that people might feel, because as I say, you can go from one end to the other because of something completely out of your control, like COVID. Certainly we do see when people haven't grown up with with somebody that talks to them about money or understands money, that certainly makes it tough for them. And if you look on our website, we've got some stories and from our clients. And there's one from a gentleman that we work with, and we didn't script it, but boy, he came out with some gold when he answered his questions. And he said in his family, money came in to be spent. And you spent it, like I said earlier, until it was gone. There was never any conscious decision about that. Whereas I think about my kids, even when they were really little, we'd go to the supermarket and I'd say, there's 6 toilet rolls in that packet and 4 toilet rolls in that packet. How would we work out which is the best one to buy? And so we were always talking about money. And when we had something surrounding money in the house, we involved the kids in it. So, money was something that we talked openly about. There was no embarrassment around it, whereas a lot of families, it's very private and you don't talk about it at all. So that makes it really tough for people. And I think we are all, our personalities are all different. You were talking about neuroscience before and around dopamine levels and serotonin and all those kind of things. I think when we you look at some of the work that's come out of the Dunedin study about how early in life you recognise patterns. And, understanding your attitudes to money, your belief systems around it, recognising if you're an impulsive person or, I'm really good with money generally, but I'm also really anal about things, very, very precise and measured when I do things. That's probably meant I'm really boring at a party. I tend to be quite good with money. I'm probably not the person who, you're going to take to a hen's night and do something outrageous because it's just not me. But those parts of my personality probably make me better at making money decisions than someone that's really impulsive and does things on the fly. But those attitudes are really important. Knowledge is really important. A lot of the people that we work with, regardless of how much they earn, get into strife because when they need money, they haven't gone through the process, or maybe they don't have the capability or capacity, or depending on their situation, to understand the true cost of borrowing. And we see a lot of people, and this is where the work that the other Commerce Commission, FinCap, the government have done around the triple CFA, it has been really good because, I don't know if you realise, but some of those payday lenders before the changes to the legislation were charging 2% interest a day.
Yeah.
And so someone would borrow money because they were in a spot, then couldn't pay it back, and ended up owing many times what they had borrowed, and end up facing a no asset procedure or an insolvency because the debt had got so out of hand. But if you don't understand that stuff, or you have, your literacy is not strong, or you might have all the ability in the world, but I don't know about you, when I'm really stressed, my brain is mush. And when you live, and we know that when people are highly stressed, their brain is just, again, in that fight flight mode of getting away from the problem, and we don't think clearly. And so we make poor decisions because we're under so much stress, and particularly for people who live with very little income, they don't have the options necessarily that you and I might have, where if my car blew up, if I didn't have the money in the bank, I could probably draw $5,000 on my mortgage, which would be a low interest rate. I could spread it out and I could pay it off. If I don't have that option, I have no money in the bank, I have no assets to borrow against, no one's going to give me credit because my credit rating is not great, you're left with the only place to go are people who are going to charge you very, very high interest. And if you don't have the ability to pay it back, then suddenly your $500 borrowing has cost you thousands of dollars, which is getting better with the changes, as I say, to the triple CFA, that will have a really positive effect in that respect. But you can see people slip very quickly from a minor problem to a major problem because they either didn't know or they weren't in the right place to make a decision. And that's why we never judge people, because you do what you do in that moment to the best of your ability. And sometimes, it's the only options people can see for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, our neighbor's payday loan provider. So that's when I found out about it. I was like, oh my God. And then
Yeah,
there's been a lot of slack around the new legislation. That's what triples CFA people have been talking about. And it was coming after payday loan providers and putting more restrictions. And then
yeah,
it was sort of making sure that you're assessing it, that a person has the ability to pay it off, and
yeah,
how they do that change. So then some people getting less loans approved.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but it's an interesting insight from your standpoint,
yeah.
seeing it as a helping hand to protect against those people in those tough situations. What you talked about parents. Like, I've never had kids, so you'd be the expert over me. How do you instill the values in your children, or how do you, like, you talked about hey, compare these different toilet paper rolls, and you make sure there's transparency. How can, like, a mother or father listening to this want to sort of instill good values around money for their kids do?
I would never claim to be um, parenting. We're pretty awesome, so I guess that's all right. Um, could be a bit biased. Um, I think talking about it is a big thing. And I know, and taking opportunities for learning. Like I remember um, my son, when he was very young, like in his teenage years, shared an email address with us and got a email back from a payday lender. And it was like, oh, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. Or another great example was a phone. Oh, I get this free phone if I join up for this plan. And me saying, nothing is for free, my darling. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Okay, let's sit down and see. Let's work this out together and look at how you are paying for this. Because at the end of the day, no matter how old you are, you have control over your life and you make the choices that you want to make around your money. And that's absolutely okay. If you want to blow every cent partying every night, that is your choice. But you need to make those decisions with all of the knowledge, including what the consequences are, to decide if that's what you really want. Because when you talk about dopamine, we all will put off long-term gain for short-term satisfaction. That's why, we drink, we eat chocolate, all the things that we do that we know aren't good for us. But I think involving kids in conversations, talking about money. I know my daughter, the first time she got she brought something on hire purchase. And I always said to them, only ever use it if you know you can pay it off in the amount in less time than you're supposed to, and it's interest free. And look at the fees when it's setting it up. Only do it if you are completely in control of every decision around that. And so she's like, Mum, I'm going to buy a bed, and I've done this, and I've asked that, and I've been here, and have I covered everything? Is there anything else I need to check? And it says the clause. What does that mean? So you, again, like everything, you're having those conversations, but it requires confidence to do that, and not everyone has that confidence.
It's quite interesting. Yeah, I'm just realizing how little of those situations I come across because of the nature of how we're positioned.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so what would be, like, even just NAP? I learned about it last week. NAP, the a way to write off your debt, and so then you don't have to pay it, essentially, if
yeah.
you meet certain criteria of financial hardship. Just like, let's say some people in that, like, bankruptcy or in a challenging position. What are some of those tangible vehicles outside of the behavioral side that people can use?
Well, there are what used to be summary instalment orders, now called debt repayment orders. That's for people that owe less than 50,000 and can pay back at least a percentage of what they owe. So it goes through insolvency. You make an application, goes to the creditors, and you might pay it back at 50 cents in the dollar or whatever it may be, and it's paid off at the end. No asset procedures for people underneath 50,000 and above that, bankruptcy. But there are some, it sounds like a get out of jail free card, when you first hear about it, but there are some significant implications of going through those procedures that people need to understand.
Hmm. I
You
guess
know,
their likelihood of being able to get future loans would be a
yeah,
big contributor, and then
economic,
jobs,
yep,
different
jobs.
types of jobs. Like my job, probably be tricky if you had that. You might not be able to be a financial advisor. All right. Well, as we wrap this up, what would be, either like a tangible free tool, maybe you had on the website or something to look at, or places people can go to learn about this?
Yeah. Gosh, the sorted websites are really good for having a look at. There's lots of really good tools that are available, but I think, yeah, I would say to people, if you're struggling, or even if you're thinking about something, come along and talk to an organisation like ours, even if it's just over the phone. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to charge you. They can point you in the right direction. And I think if we're thinking about, some of the golden rules, I guess, around money, I said to you in the beginning, we are changing our name. We're moving from Tauranga Budget Advisory Service to Bay Financial Mentors, Tauā Whenua, which recognises the reciprocal nature of learning with our clients and that unconditional support of them. But get rid of the word budget from your diet and just think about it, your diet from your and just think about it as being smart with money, because budgets speak of going without, being miserable and all that sort of thing. Think about it as just being really smart, because we all work hard for our money and most of us don't want to throw it away. I would say decide what your goals are. They're your goals and nobody else's. You decide what's important to you, and then you decide what changes you want to make to get there. But it's, absolutely your choice as to what you want to do. Give your money a job. Like, if you have ever, and I challenge you to find anyone who hasn't, lay in bed at night with that sick feeling in your stomach because you've got a big bill coming that you can't pay for. And this is something I say to my kids: take control of it. Work out what your expenses are and put some money aside each week into a separate account, so that when the bills come along, you just go, that's okay, I got that covered. And that's not just power and phone, which a lot of people do. It's thinking about maintenance on your car. It's thinking about school fees. It's thinking about reg and WAF. Because it helps you to get a really good idea of what your true expenses are. I mean, most people, I know my husband and I have had this conversation, where does all the money go? Because you look at the mortgage is this, and we spend this much on food, so where's the rest of it go? Insurances and phone plans and all sorts of other things like that. So actually doing that, even if you don't do it for a budget reason, just to do it so you can sleep at night and you don't have to be stressed to the max every time something big like a rates bill comes in, then I would do that. It's worth it for that, if nothing else. And be really conscious about the way that you spend. A lot of people who are very wealthy are very clever with their money. Not mean, but just smart about it. And make sure when you're entering into things like, particularly borrowing, that you understand the true cost of borrowing and what will happen if you can't meet your repayments. And there are other options, like there are a couple of organisations around that give interest-free loans to people, or low interest loans that we can apply for. And most people don't even know that they exist.
I didn't.
So, no. Ngā Tangata Finance, Good Shepherd will help to fund people with low interest loans where you are not going to get yourself into strife. It takes a little bit longer to organise. You can't do it while lying in bed with your eye mask on. But they can be organised, and they're a lot better opportunity for borrowing if you have to borrow than getting caught up in something that's really high interest. And the other thing I would say is to come and talk to us. As I said, a lot of what we do is advocacy. We spend a lot of time speaking to creditors, organising payment plans, getting interest addressed. We also do a lot of looking at contracts. We find people who are paying for things they should never have had to pay for because the insurance within the contract should cover it. One of my team just had a big battle for someone who had a dreadful credit score because somebody else with the same name, this happened to my niece as well actually, was being recorded on their credit score, and they were trying to get a house and couldn't get in anywhere because every time they were credit checked, this ugly report would come up.
Oh, so what the hell?
Yeah. And there's no point in saying to the landlord, "That's not me." somebody, that's another person, that's another Ryan Mountain, Um,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, whatever, mate. So, there's lots of stuff like that we do. Negotiating to get costs reduced and things like that on loans. There's a lot that can be done that's really hard to do for yourself when you're in that completely overwhelmed, stressed out state.
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, I think you killed it. Well, thank you for coming. And I think it's a no brainer. It's free.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
just turn up if you're in a tough position. Don't abuse the system, but like if you're in a situation you're not sure where to go, then
yeah.
I don't see if they're anything like you, they'll be all right.
Yeah, not too awful. Look, and you can come once and never come again, or you can. We have people that come every month for a while. It's whatever you need to get back on top, and it's just smart. It's just smart to use the services that are there because that's what they're there for.
Yeah, preach, sister. All right, well, we'll wrap that up.